Good morning. I'm Mike Fields. I'm Dean of the H. Wayne Huizenga School of Business and Entrepreneurship. It's a pleasure to have you here at our second annual town hall meeting. We've got a very timely topic today, the road ahead for the auto industry, and we've got two absolute leaders in the industry here to share their thoughts. We have Mr. Mike Jackson, the CEO of AutoNation, the world's largest auto retailer. And we have Mr. Fritz Henderson, the CEO of General Motors. So they're going to be here today. We're going to have about 15 minutes each of general comments from Mr. Jackson and Mr. Henderson, and then we'll have questions that have come from our students and also through our webcast. So it's before we get started, I want to introduce some special guests that we have in the audience. First, Mr. Ray Ferrero, the president of Nova Southeastern University. Next, the chair of the Board of Governors for the Huizenga School, Mr. Paul Solarulo. And the founder of AutoNation and our H. Wayne Huizenga School of Business and Entrepreneurship, Mr. Huizenga. So we're going to get started first with Mr. Jackson. Mike?
Thank you, Michael.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Fritz, welcome home.
Mike, thank you.
He's had a home here in South Florida since your time in Latin America, I believe.
Yes.
And nice of you to come down here flying commercial these days.
Always.
Always. Where everyone here is especially grateful. Unquestionably, the past year has been an unprecedented period of economic turmoil like the world has never seen as far as complexity and the scale of what happened or could have happened. It surpassed the Great Depression, and no question the automobile industry was swept up into it with dramatic implications, and none was more impacted than General Motors. So I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about how we got there, where we are, and then, very importantly, the road ahead. If you really want to look at the roots of this unprecedented economic turmoil, no question you have to go to the housing industry. The housing industry was having a wonderful time, record years, and about 2005 they ran out of buyers who could really afford homes. It was the end of a hot cycle. It was time for a minor correction, a pause, to let things rebalance. And the housing industry said, unequivocally, we're having so much fun, we got to figure out a way to keep the party going. And in housing, the key component to volume is credit. You tell me the credit standards, and I can tell you how many houses are going to be sold. So what did the housing industry do? It invented this idea that it would lend money to people who couldn't necessarily pay it back. And you see here the explosion in subprime and alternate type mortgages where they completely dropped their credit standards. We picked this up in the automobile business because we would have customers come into our showrooms and say, I just bought a new house down the street. It's got a 2-car garage. I'd like to put 2 new cars in it. And we'd say, okay, that's fine. Here's a credit app. How much do you have to put down? Do you have a job? Where do you work? Normal questions like that. And they would look at us like we were aliens or something. They say, hey, I just got to the keys to the house, passing a breathalyzer test. I don't know why I got to tell you where I work and if I pay my bills or not. This was an indication to us in the car business that maybe we were at a tipping point and the cycle was about to change. One thing you can say for the car industry as compared to the housing industry, we did not drop our credit standards. There was credit discipline in the automobile industry right through this unprecedented period, whereas you could see the housing industry went completely crazy. So what happened in the auto industry at this tipping point in 2005 where we felt the cycle was going to change? The industry initially resisted the downturn with incentives in pricing, but eventually they accepted, let the volumes fall, let's enter into restructuring, let's correct the mistakes of the past, and let's prepare for when the cycle turns. And so by the summer of 2008, The industry was deep into this cyclical decline, about a 16% peak to trough, and the industry was looking at where's the bottom and when it's going to turn. When Armageddon occurred, and all of a sudden we were into something completely different. What exactly happened? If you look at, this is the selling rate annualized, and you can see I've split in half the month of September for sales in the automobile industry. And on September 15th of 2008, with the precipitous bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers, which we could spend the rest of the day here talking about, which many books will be written about, as probably the biggest mistake in managing an economy in the history of mankind. A $1 trillion balance sheet was thrown into bankruptcy over the weekend with no plan of how to deal with it, and we went from a credit squeeze to a credit panic. And credit was completely withdrawn from our customers, and from one day to the next, we had an incremental decline in sales in volume for every brand, from every manufacturer, from everywhere in the world, in every geographic location of 25%. If you study economics, if you study the automobile industry, there has never been any single event in the history of the business that has ever had that kind of impact. Nothing even close to it. And as you see, we went from a recessionary situation as far as the auto industry concerned to an absolute depression. You would have to go back on a per capita basis to the Second World War to find comparable sales figures. And by the way, during the Second World War, the industry was making tanks and planes and not cars. That's how dramatic the situation was. So here you see, we cascaded into an absolute depression of selling rate of 10 million versus a normal of 17 million. In total, a decline approaching 40%. And even though the industry was doing so many things to restructure during the recession, there was companies, this was the ultimate stress test. Some companies could pass it better than others, but we were confronted with two companies that were on the precipice of going out of business, namely General Motors and Chrysler.